Good afternoon, everyone. It's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. It is a sunny afternoon here in the Portland area on 29th January 2025. I had a false start with this because I was coughing and had to stop and take a cough drop. I'm determined to make it through this time no matter what, but you'll have to forgive me if I'm coughing, so I'm clearing my throat. I still have this nasty cold. We're up to the 10th of March, 1921, and just a brief recap. So on the 9th, Dmitri it was his first full day back in Paris from his long trip beginning in Denmark and then going on to Germany for 6 days. And he spent part of it having some family time with his sister and brother-in-law and his stepmother, whom he called Mamushka. And the tensions were building, beginning that morning when he first got up and had a kind of conferred with Golevsky on what they could expect as far as blowback from this trip to Germany. And then Maria is very tactful about it. She doesn't say anything, but Mamushka dives right in and says, well, do you know, Ducky is in Paris right now, Ducky being Grand Duchess Victoria Fyodorovna, the wife of Grand Duke Kirill Vladimirovich, and Ducky was very much, I think I can stake my neck out and say that she was very keen on being the Russian empress in exile, and so this was bound to be trouble for Dmitri. And Mamushka said, well, I'm avoiding her, but if I hear her making some snide comments about you, my boy, how should I handle it? And so Dmitri says he gave her some advice, the main thing being that if Ducky had any complaints about him, any negative things to say about him, she should say them to him. And so that indeed is what's going to happen, but not quite yet, because I'm breaking this diary entry of the 10th of March into two parts, because we have two very strong-willed women in this particular diary entry, and each one gets almost exactly half of the diary entry, and I didn't want them to kind of bleed together. I mean, it could have been done time-wise, but I want each of them to have the spotlight that she deserves. Okay, so the 10th of March was a Thursday. Dmitri again remarks that he is in Paris and gives us his address, 76 Rue Miro Ménil. So here we go. I spent the morning writing, then took a walk in the Bois with Shagubatov. I lunched with him in a private room at La Rue. Maria Gulia and his brother were there, and also Pete and Mimi Polovtsov. We had blini on the occasion of Russian Cheese Fair week, but I couldn't stay long because at 3 o'clock I had a scheduled rendezvous with the Princess Duchesse. During lunch, I was called to the telephone, and it turned out that Ducky was calling from Mamushka's, where she had had lunch. And she asked me to come have a talk with her that very day at the Hotel Loti. Naturally, I agreed. Things were quite interesting at the home of the Duchess Duchesse. She's a great friend of Pete's, a woman of bad reputation in Paris because of her Germanophilism. But though I don't know how it came about, she is in close contact with all the politicians in France. It was precisely for that reason that I wanted to go to her after my Berlin visit, because I didn't want various stupid things to start circulating on that topic. She promised to do everything she could to prevent that. Okay, so this is basically damage control. He knows there's going to be a bad reaction, and he doesn't want the French government, among other institutions and people, to be upset with him. All right. let's see. He and Shagubatov and Maria and Gulia and Pete and Mimi Polovtsov all go off and have blini at La Rue, a very chic restaurant in Paris. And the occasion, Dmitri says, is Russian Maslenitsa. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I translated it Cheese Fair Week because it's not Sunday. In my in my Greek Orthodox church, we always talk about Cheese Fair Sunday. So you have Meat Fair Sunday, which comes the week before Cheese Fair Sunday. So Cheese Fair Sunday is the last Sunday, the last day before Lent starts. And in the Orthodox Church, you give up not only meat for Lent, but you also give up dairy. And if you're doing the strict fast, you even give up oil. You give up olive oil and other kinds of vegetable oil. So, you know, a lot of people don't do the strict fast. I admire the ones who do. It's tough. But I don't think this little group, I don't think any of them will probably be doing the strict fast. But you know, it's a holiday that they're observing, Cheese Fair Week instead of Cheese Fair Sunday. So it's your last chance. So you've already given up meat, but this is your last chance to have dairy, not just cheese, but any kind of dairy before you start fasting for Lent. Okay, so presumably they're having all kinds of good dairy things, whether they plan to fast or not. I think a lot of people like me just fast during Holy Week itself. But what do I know? Okay, so the Princess Duchesse. Before we get into that, let's talk about what happens during lunch. Dmitri gets a phone call. Clearly, Mamachka knew where he was going to be. This lunch had been planned. I don't know why she didn't go. Maybe she wasn't invited, but she knew he was going to be there. And it's not quite clear to me whether it's Ducky. It seems like it's Ducky calling Dmitri from Mamachka's apartment, rather than Mamachka calling him to deliver a message from Ducky. But at any rate, you know, the day before, Mamachka had said, "Oh, I'm avoiding her like the plague. I'm avoiding Ducky." But but having spoken to Dmitri about it, she seems to have rushed right out and invited Ducky to come over, which is kind of funny, actually. And so there is this summons, basically. Come and over and let's talk about it and let's do it now. She doesn't even want to wait a day. So Dmitri has this appointment, but he agrees. Naturally, I agreed, he says. He, like I've said several times in the past, I think he was a person who had a hard time saying no if he was put on the spot. But he probably realized anyway that this was something that he needed to do. Okay, so now I forgot when I started this to do the usual thing of telling you what new person or people would be mentioned in the diary entry. So in this case, it is the Duchesse Duchesse, and she, for some reason, Dmitri uses the word not just princess, but princesses. I had a scheduled rendezvous with the princesses Duchesse, but that obviously he jotted that down wrongly because it's one person and she's a duchess. And so he corrects himself later in the diary entry and says, the Duchesse Duchesse. And here I wrote down all these things about her, but did I write down her name? Yes, I wrote down her Christian name, which is Anne. I didn't write down her maiden name. At any rate, the Duchesses were at the very peak of the French nobility. So it's really not surprising that she was quite a well-connected woman. And this is a diary entry because of the false start that I got because of my cough. I had the impression that I'd already said some things that I should have said. And I should have said, importantly, that I am breaking this diary entry into two parts. So you've only heard the first paragraph of the 10th of March. And time-wise, I could have done both paragraphs, but this diary entry is really dominated by two quite dominating, quite forceful and strong-willed women, and I thought each one of them deserved to have the spotlight on herself. So I decided to divide it in two, which wasn't difficult, because basically you have the Duchesse Duchesse in the first paragraph, and the second paragraph then is turned over completely to Ducky. So let's talk about the Duchesse Duchesse. So she was, by this time, she was in her 70s. And given that I probably have not pronounced her name correctly, I will spell it. It is D apostrophe Uzes. I don't know what the name is for the accents, but over the E there's the leftward sloping accent, and yeah, so she was the heiress to the Veuve Clicquot champagne fortune. So that's interesting. I have some guesses as to what the champagne house that Dmitri would eventually work for was, but I suppose it could have been Veuve Clicquot once he had this connection with this woman. And what's really interesting is that she's a friend of Pete Polovtsov's. I mean, good old Pete, he really gets around. If you recall, despite being a married woman with his wife Mimi, he went out carousing with Dmitri and Bob Luders one evening in Paris, and they ended up at what seems to have been a brothel. So when I first heard that line, that he had been a good friend of Pete that Pete had been a good friend of the Duchesses, and that she was a woman of bad reputation, I thought, okay, I guess I can guess what kind of bad reputation she has. But I should have read a little further, because once I got to the end of the sentence, I realized that the bad reputation, as Dmitri perceives it, is because she's pro-German. And this is only a few years after the First World War. Well, I didn't find anything one way or another to say whether she was pro-German or not, but she was quite the impressive woman. She was a writer. She was a sculptor, actually, of some note. And there's a famous painting of her doing this huge, making this huge statue of Joan of Arc. She was a feminist. She supported causes like, the women's right to vote and other rights, full rights for women. She was a hunter who broke with tradition by leading her own hunt. That was, typically an exclusively male role, but she did it and got people to join her hunt, and apparently did it very well. She was a motorist, going back to, when the first cars could be purchased. And in fact, funnily enough, she was the first woman in France to get a driver's license and the first one to get a speeding ticket. She was a mother of 4 children. She was a conservative. She had been a royalist for a while and put lots of money behind a royalist politician in France. But then she had kind of, become a bit more moderate, I guess, and wasn't looking any more for the restoration of the monarchy in France. But you can see, if those were her proclivities, you can see why she would be willing to be helpful to Dmitri. The fly in the ointment is that she was an anti-Semite, and she supported, in part at least, an anti-Semitic journal in France. So it's a distinctly mixed bag there, but Dmitri is quite right that she was very politically active and influential within France, and so she was a person who could get the word out to that that layer of society in France, the political layer or class, if you will, that he understood that his trip to Germany was a bad idea, and that he had some regrets about it, and that he was not himself a Germanophile, that he was neutral. He was pro-Russia and not pro-Germany or pro-France or pro-anything. He just wanted Russia to flourish. Okay, so that's that. And next time, you'll want to come back for the second half of this diary entry, where there is this showdown with Ducky. It's high noon with Ducky. So big drama. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.